What happens when the most exciting rookie in women's basketball history meets a league that's not ready for change? What we're witnessing in the WNBA right now isn't just about basketball. It's about power, voice, and who gets to control the narrative. And some players are done staying quiet about it. If you've been following women's basketball this season, you know something's been brewing beneath the surface. Veterans speaking out, rookies challenging the status quo, and fans demanding better treatment for their favorite players. Today, we're diving deep into the real story behind the headlines and why this moment could reshape the entire league forever. Let's start with the facts. This WNBA season has been unlike any other, and a lot of that comes down to one name, Caitlin Clark. Whether you love her or hate her, you can't ignore the numbers. Record-breaking viewership, sold-out arenas, merchandise flying off the shelves, social media engagement through the roof. But here's what makes this interesting and complicated. Clark didn't just bring eyeballs to the league. She brought expectations. New fans who weren't familiar with WNBA politics. Young viewers who grew up in the social media age, where transparency isn't optional. People who expect their favorite athletes to have a voice and use it. And that's created tension. Because the WNBA, like many established leagues, has its own way of doing things. Unwritten rules about how players should behave, what they should say, when they should speak up, and when they should stay quiet. For decades, this system worked because everyone understood their place. But what happens when a new generation of players and fans doesn't want to play by those rules anymore? Enter Sophie Cunningham. Now, Sophie's been in this league for years. She's seen how things work from the inside. She's watched talented players get sidelined for reasons that had nothing to do with their performance on the court. And this season, she decided she was done watching quietly. When questions started swirling about player treatment and league decisions, Sophie didn't give the typical corporate-approved response. Instead, she said what a lot of people were thinking. You don't sideline your biggest talents unless you're scared of what they represent. That wasn't just a quote. It was a declaration, a line in the sand that said, we're not going to pretend controversial decisions are just basketball anymore. And the response was immediate. Fans rallied. Other players started paying attention. Even media members who usually stick to safe topics began asking harder questions. But Sophie wasn't alone in this fight. Lexi Hull, another player who's never been afraid to speak her mind, stepped up with her own brand of activism. But Lexi's approach was different. Where Sophie was direct and fiery, Lexi was strategic and calculated. She used social media like a chess master, dropping hints and raising questions that got people thinking without giving the league easy targets for retaliation. Remember that black and white photo with just the word loyalty as a caption? Simple, powerful, and impossible to ignore. It said everything without saying anything directly. Fans filled in the blanks, creating their own interpretations and spreading the message further than any direct statement could have reached. But here's where this story gets really interesting. Because while players were finding their voices, fans were finding theirs too. And modern sports fans don't just watch passively. They participate, they investigate, they organize. Within hours of the first controversial decisions, fans were doing the work that sports journalists used to do, compiling statistics, creating comparison charts, tracking social media activity, building timelines. They turned every questionable call, every minute reduction, every media snub into evidence of a bigger pattern. Hashtags like #JusticeForClark and #LetThemSpeak weren't just trending, they were organizing principles. Fans used them to coordinate campaigns, share information, and pressure the league for answers. This wasn't just complaining on social media, this was digital activism with real-world impact. Season ticket holders started making their voices heard. Merchandise sales became a form of protest. Television ratings became a referendum on league decisions. When fans feel like their favorite players are being treated unfairly, they vote with their wallets and their attention, and the league noticed. But the most powerful thing the fans did was refuse to accept generic corporate responses. When the league issued carefully worded statements that didn't really address the concerns, fans called it out immediately. They demanded specifics, they wanted transparency, and they weren't going to be satisfied with PR speak. This created a new dynamic in sports media. Leagues used to control the narrative through official channels and friendly reporters. But when fans can fact-check everything in real time and organize their own media campaigns, that control becomes much harder to maintain. So how did the WNBA respond to all this pressure? Pretty much exactly how you'd expect an established institution to respond when it feels under attack. They circled the wagons, they issued carefully crafted statements that acknowledged concerns without admitting wrongdoing, they tried to reframe controversy as strategic decisions, and asked fans to trust the process. The problem is, in 2024, that playbook doesn't work anymore. Fans saw right through it. Players called it out with everything from eye-roll emojis to direct contradictions. Independent media started digging deeper into league politics. Former players began sharing their own stories of being silenced or sidelined. What was supposed to calm things down only made them worse. Because when people feel like they're being gaslit, told that what they're seeing with their own eyes isn't really happening, they get angry. And angry fans are persistent fans. The league found itself in an impossible position. Acknowledge the concerns and risk validating the criticism. Ignore them and risk looking tone-deaf and out of touch. Double down on their decisions and risk alienating their most passionate supporters. They chose option 3, and it backfired spectacularly. Because what fans heard wasn't, "Trust us, we know what we're doing." What they heard was, "Your opinions don't matter, and we don't owe you explanations." But while the public battle was raging on social media and in press conferences, something even more significant was happening behind closed doors. The WNBA locker rooms, traditionally spaces where players stayed unified regardless of external drama, were beginning to fracture along unexpected lines. On one side, you had veterans who had learned to navigate the system by staying quiet, picking their battles, and trusting that good performance would eventually be rewarded. These players had seen careers end over smaller controversies. They knew the cost of speaking out. On the other side, younger players who grew up in a different era. Players who watched NBA stars use their platforms for social change. Players who saw athletes like Serena Williams and Alex Morgan speak truth to power without destroying their careers. Players who believed that staying silent was actually the bigger risk. Sources close to multiple teams started reporting the same thing. Team meetings were getting tense. Players were choosing sides. Some were privately supporting the outspoken players while staying publicly neutral. Others were worried that too much controversy would hurt the league's growth and their own opportunities. But something interesting happened in the middle of all this division. Instead of tearing the players apart, it started bringing them together around a shared realization. If this could happen to the league's biggest stars, it could happen to anyone. That's when you started seeing subtle shows of support across team lines. Players liking posts they might not have engaged with before. Veterans privately reaching out to younger players who were taking risks by speaking out. Stars from rival teams finding common ground on issues bigger than their on-court competition. So why does any of this matter beyond basketball? Because what's happening in the WNBA right now is a microcosm of larger conversations happening across sports, entertainment, and society as a whole. It's about who gets to have a voice, who gets to control the narrative, and what happens when traditional power structures meet a generation that refuses to stay quiet. This isn't just a women's basketball story. It's a story about how social media has democratized influence, how fans now expect transparency from the organizations they support, how athletes increasingly see themselves as more than just entertainers. They see themselves as advocates, role models, and change agents. The WNBA is dealing with the same challenges that have rocked the NFL, the NBA, Hollywood, and corporate America. The old playbook of controlling information and managing controversy through traditional channels doesn't work when everyone has a platform and nothing stays secret for long. And here's the thing that makes this particularly significant. The WNBA has always positioned itself as progressive, as different from other major sports leagues. They've built their brand around social justice, player empowerment, and authentic connection with fans. So when players and fans feel like the league isn't living up to those values, the backlash is even more intense. So where does this all lead? What actually changes when the dust settles? First, player empowerment isn't going back in the bottle. Once athletes realize they have power through their platforms, their fan connections, their economic impact, they don't give that up. The WNBA will have to adapt to players who see themselves as partners, not just employees. Second, fan engagement has fundamentally changed. These aren't casual viewers who will accept whatever they're given. These are invested stakeholders who expect transparency, accountability, and respect for their intelligence. They'll continue to organize, investigate, and demand better. Third, this controversy has actually shown the strength of the WNBA community. Players, fans, and media members who care deeply about the league have been willing to risk comfort and relationships to fight for its improvement. That's not destruction, that's evolution. The leagues that will thrive in this new environment are the ones that embrace transparency, listen to their stakeholders, and treat controversy as an opportunity for growth rather than a problem to be managed. And we're already seeing some positive signs. More open dialogue between players and management, policy discussions that include player voices, recognition that the league's success depends on keeping its stars happy and engaged, not just compliant. Ultimately, this isn't a story about drama or controversy. It's a story about growth, about a league and its community figuring out how to navigate success, visibility, and the responsibility that comes with both. The WNBA is in a unique position. They have incredibly talented, articulate, socially conscious athletes. They have passionate, engaged, intelligent fans. They have unprecedented media attention and commercial opportunities. The question is whether they can create a culture that harnesses all of that energy instead of trying to control it. Players like Sophie Cunningham and Lexi aren't trying to tear down the league, they're trying to build it up. They're demanding that it live up to its potential and its values. They're fighting for a future where players can be authentic, fans can be heard, and the product on the court reflects the principles the league claims to represent. That's the real story here, not just the controversy, but what it represents. A new generation of players who won't stay quiet, fans who won't stay passive, and a league that has the opportunity to lead by example in how sports organizations can evolve and improve. What do you think? Are players right to speak out, or should they trust the process? Is fan activism helpful or harmful to the league's growth? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that really matter in women's sports.